This is how to work out your cuff and the end of your sleeve at your wrist to fit the cuff. Once again, I've taken the block, the template shape of the sleeve, and I've just drawn around it onto the paper. So I haven't added seam allowances yet, I've just got the block drawn around onto my pattern paper. Now, what we're going to do is make a cuff. Here I have an ordinary cuff. It has a placket and it has one pleat just here, and when it does up, the placket sits nice and flat. So how do we work out the measurements to a pattern, to the bottom of a sleeve that fits into the cuff measurement? Well, a pretty standard cuff measurement for a lady is about 22 centimetres. So when it's done up, if this was my cuff pattern, when it's done up, it overlaps with a button and buttonhole, you're talking about a wrist measurement of about 20 centimetres. Now that can vary, again, depending on whose wrist you're cutting for and whether it's a man's, in which case it would be a much bigger measurement. So if I'm working from the block, and the block comes all the way down to the wrist, if I'm going to add a cuff, I need to take the measurement of the cuff off my block. Otherwise I'll have sleeve length plus cuff, which will make it too long. So I've decided I'm going to do a cuff width of 4 centimetres. So on my sleeve, I need to take off 4 centimetres. So the finish of my sleeve now is this line. So this doesn't exist. So once I've sewn on my cuff, then I come back to the original length of the sleeve. So first of all, take off your cuff width from the block. Then, because I've got a placket, now the placket usually sits on the back of the sleeve, sort of in the middle. So this is my front half of the sleeve, this is my back half of the sleeve. We've got 2 notches for the back, 1 notch for the front on the sleeve head. The placket is going to sit roughly in the middle. So let's say about 6 centimetres in. I'll just do that in pencil for the minute. Now, I've got it in my head that I'm going to add 1 pleat, just like the shirt I showed earlier. So if I'm going to add a pleat in, I'd need to put extra fabric into my measurement before I can take it out. So again, depending on the cloth I'm using, will depend how deep that pleat is. I'm going to put in an extra 3 centimetres. And then when my pleat's over, it will be 1.5 deep. So now this is where we need to do some maths. If my cuff needs to finish 22 centimetres, and it has a placket on it, like this, you can see I've added the width of a placket there. If I've taken a seam allowance of 1.5, that leaves me 2 centimetres. Because what I've taken for seam allowance, I've put back on. So my overall width of placket is 2.5, but my extra that I've added into the wrist measurement on my pattern is just the 2 centimetres. So minus that 2 centimetres equals 20 centimetres for the pattern on my sleeve. But I want to put in 3 centimetres for my pleat. So my sleeve pattern needs to measure 23 centimetres. That includes the pleat. So if let's use a tape measure for this. So 23 centimetres altogether. Well, at the moment it measures just over 25, so I need to take a centimetre off either side. I need to get rid of just over 2 centimetres. So I'm literally just going to take that off either side of my wrist. So a centimetre off there and a centimetre off there. And then I should be measuring 23, 23, with a few just 1 or 2 millimetres extra. So I'll just come in slightly with my metre rule. So the lines I'm drawing now are my new sleeve underarm seams. So it's not this one anymore, it's this one. And don't forget, I'm still working net. There's no seam allowances on this. I always want to work and be thinking in finished measurements. So this is the slit for my placket. I'm going to take 0.5 of a seam allowance when I sew this placket on, and now I want to put a pleat in. Well, say my pleat sits 2 centimetres away from the placket, and then it's 3 centimetres deep, I said, didn't I? And the pleat usually, let me just do that in biro so you can see it. The pleat usually folds towards the placket, like this. And there's my 3 centimetres. So I'm hoping, I've already cut a cuff which was 22 centimetres long. So if I'm taking the net lines, I check this fits, so net line takes me to my pleat there. Pleat gets folded out, which goes to there. And then I have a 2.5 placket, 2.5 placket on there. And then that comes back to the slit there, because I've got a bound edge underneath. The 0.5 that I take off, I put back on again, if you see what I mean. So I've stitched here, but I brought it over, so I've still got that measurement. And now I know my cuff fits. So I've just run through that again. I've done my cuff at 22 centimetres. When it's buttoned up, it will be 20 centimetres, because it wraps over for the button and buttonhole. Therefore, the wrist to my sleeve needs to measure 20 centimetres plus the amount I've put for my pleat, yes, so that's 23 centimetres altogether. And the way I check that is I actually take my cuff and measuring along the net lines, I've got a seam on here, as you can see, I have a seam on my cuff. So measuring along the net line, so going from here, I hit the pleat. That pleat will get closed. And so this position here goes to this edge of the pleat. I'm going to take off 0.5 of a seam allowance to attach my placket. And my placket will be 2.5. So that takes me to there. And then that should be my remaining measurement. So I know that once I've sewn my placket on there, and with the extra measurement it gives, with the width of the placket, plus taking away my pleat once I've folded that, it's going to fit into my cuff, which I've already made and put seam allowances around. All I need to do now is add seam allowances onto this shape, my sleeve, which at the moment has no seam allowances, so I need to add those. This is my old line, I don't want it. This is my old line, I don't want it. And this is my old line. So this has all been about measurements. And pattern cutting is about measurements in order to get the correct fit. I hope that's helped work out how to put your wrist measurement into a cuff. It is complicated, or it can seem complicated at the beginning. You'll also notice that I've done my cuff so that it has a seam along the top. I'll show you this cuff again. It's a very ordinary, straightforward cuff, and this could be on the fold here, but I've chosen to put a seam there. This has got a seam there because I think having a seam rather than a fold just gives a little bit more structure to your cuff edge. Otherwise it can be a little bit flimsy. There's nothing wrong with cutting your cuff on the fold. I could have done that twice the width and cut it on the fold.